A lot of pediatric therapists and teachers think that they're burnt out, but really they're just bored. So stick with me for just a minute and let me explain what I mean. So I'm Karen Dudek-Brannan, and I help pediatric therapists and educators be better leaders so that they can make a bigger impact on the clients and students that they serve. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about the whole burnout conversation because I think it's really misunderstood. So obviously, if you're in a position where you're serving K-12 kids or even young adults, there's a lot of administrative demands that come on top of your job. Like if you're a teacher or a therapist, a lot of times you're focused on trying to show up for your students and your clients, but at the same time, there's all these other, like there's this paperwork and just all sorts of other things that come about with your job. And so naturally, it can sometimes bring about this feeling of, number one, feeling like there are demands and circumstances placed upon you that are impacting the way that you are serving your students, some things that feel like they're out of your control. And so that can be very frustrating. And then there's just all this stuff that you have to deal with that sometimes feels like it takes away from how you are able to serve. I know as an SLP, for example, that's what I did when I was in the school systems for 14 years. There were all these, this planning for IEP meetings, these filling out progress reports and doing Medicaid billing and having to deal with all of these legal mandates that seemed like it was just busy work. And so a lot of times when people are talking about how to help therapists and teachers feel more empowered in their roles, how to help them feel more satisfied with their work. Yes, all of it comes down to making a bigger impact on the students that you're working with and actually seeing that impact. But a lot of the solutions that I see are really focused around self-care and reducing burnout and reducing stress. Again, recommending things like making sure that you're blocking out time for your self-care and all of that, which all of that is fine. All of the strategies that they're recommending are fine. But I think what people don't realize is that sometimes when you're feeling dissatisfied with your current role or what you're doing, it's not just that you're stressed and burnt out. It's that you don't have something that you're working on that you're really passionate and excited about. So yes, you might be super busy, but a lot of those things, again, if they're kind of like routine things, they're kind of boring and they're not the most exciting part of your job. And so if you have those things kind of piling up and then you don't have something that you are that makes you feel like you have a bigger impact and that you're excited about, a lot of times it's not really that you're just burnt out. You might just be bored because you feel like you're not really making an impact. Like it's really hard to do the same thing day in and day out when you don't actually see the impact of your services in the things that you're doing. So yes, even though you're busy, burnout might not be the issue. It might be more of an issue of boredom. So what I actually recommend, and this is what I did personally when I was in the school systems, is that yes, I had to have good systems for all the different things that I was doing. That's a huge part of it. You do want to make sure that you have good processes down for how you handle your paperwork, how you handle all of those routine things. But the whole purpose of that is to free up more time for things that really matter to you, for things that help you to be excited about the work that you're doing. So what I would do when I was in the school systems, and I still do this now in my work, even though I'm, doing something different, I'm mentoring clinicians. What I would do is that I would make sure that I had really good systems for all the things that I was doing so that, all of my stuff, I was legally compliant, I was taking care of all the things that I was doing. But what I would make sure that I would do when I would block up my time and when I would just think long term about what am I doing this school year is that I would always have some kind of a passion project or some kind of an initiative that I was working on that would be priority. And I would always block out time for that before I would even stick all of those other routine things on my schedule. And what that did for me is that, at the beginning of every school year, it would help me to feel excited about it because I had some kind of bigger picture, bigger vision thing that I was doing that would really give meaning to the work that I was doing. Because I always found that as a school therapist that, yes, obviously you can make a big difference on the students that you're serving, but there's only so much impact that you can make if you're literally just focusing on what am I doing one-on-one or, in group sessions with my students. There's a lot of other things that need to be done in the field because there are so many other barriers to providing effective service that a lot of times, if you're in that role as a therapist or a teacher, you can take on other projects and think about ways that you can actually have an impact on the way that services are delivered in your facility, in your community, just in the field as a whole. And I think that it's really important for people to do those types of things because that's what's going to make an impact, and that's going to actually help to make some changes in the way that services are delivered. So some examples of some things that I did when I was in the school systems, I did when I was working as an SLP, I did all kinds of different experiments with the way that I organized my schedule and my caseload. And I trialed this one plan called the 3-to-1 model, where you're doing 3 weeks of direct services. And then that off week, you're doing things like consultations, observations, collaborating with other teachers. And so I would work that into the whole service delivery plan. And I found that what that did is that it allowed me to really have a pulse on what was going on and to start building some relationships with teachers. And for me, it gave me this nice, it kind of helped pace my schedule. Like I always really looked forward to that week of consultations and collaborations, and I would stick evals during that week as well. And I've seen all kinds of different variations of that schedule. I know some therapists will do something like, they'll do like 4 days of direct therapy, and then they'll have, their Friday is their day that they do their consultation. So there's all different ways you can play around with it. But that's one thing that I did. And that was, I would have to say, something that I had to think of more long-term because I had to do sort of a pilot the entire school year with that. So I had to start planning the May before I actually did it. And so that really gave me something to look forward to that year because I was trying something new. I was thinking broader outside of just, like what are my lesson plans going to be? Another thing that I did was that I noticed that the students in the self-contained classroom were not getting extended school year services. And there were just basically some miscommunication with the IEP team. And the reason that I, as a speech pathologist, decided to kind of do some investigating on my own is because it was always kind of like, well, they're not going to get extended school year, but maybe they'll get speech. And speech seemed to always be that thing that was like the fallback. So that's why it got on my radar, was because the speech was always part of that conversation. But I think that this is something that anyone could have done, like a special ed teacher or a social worker or a psychologist could have done it. They were all involved in this conversation as well. It's just that I decided that I was going to be the instigator in this process. So I had to start thinking about that. And that was one of my projects for the year, is that I decided that I was going to do some research on the extended school year guidelines. And I was going to talk to a couple of the special ed teachers in my building. And I was going to, again, like see if I could make some changes in the way that things were done beyond just what am I doing in my lessons. I wanted to think bigger and think about, okay, how can I impact the way that services are delivered in my facility? So those are just some examples. But the main thing is that when I would start to feel burnt out, and when I would start to just feel like, I don't want to go to work in the morning, blah, 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 all of that, usually it wasn't that I was burnt out, it was that I was bored. So I would just encourage you, if you are a teacher, if you're someone who's involved in providing specialized services for kids, or even if you're a general education teacher, but you have a lot of students who are getting services in your classroom, if you are a therapist, if you are an SLP, a social worker, a psychologist, and I know all of those people that I'm mentioning have very, different roles and different ways that they provide, that they are of service in both the school and medical settings. But I think that, if you are someone who is feeling like limited, disempowered, burnt out, I would encourage you to kind of look at that and just see, like, is it really just that I feel stressed and burnt out, or is it because I don't feel like I'm having the impact that I want? And I'm not feeling motivated to do these things because they seem like busy work, and they feel like, I'm doing all this stuff and I'm not seeing a difference. I think that sometimes we can be motivated to actually work harder, and the harder work that we're doing doesn't feel like work if we feel really motivated and excited about what we're doing because we're seeing the impact. So yes, self-care is fine. Making sure that you're taking a break is fine. But a lot of times it's not just that we need to cut back on work. It's that we need to be doing work that feels meaningful to us. So I would be asking yourself that question if you are a therapist or a teacher who's feeling just, like you're not making the impact that you want right now. So I actually am working on a program for pediatric clinicians and educators who want to learn how they can really find their inner leader and make a bigger impact with their services. And I am actually opening enrollment to that program in September 2022. So doors are going to be open to that program in the coming months, where I am going to be supporting educators and therapists through just creating these types of initiatives and passion projects and following through on them and really figuring out how they can be a leader in their current position. So if you're interested in learning more about that program, then go to drkarendudek-brannan.com/leadership. Again, that's drkarendudek-brannan.com/leadership.